Hello, everybody. I'm Riki Stamps, Director of Programs and Events, and you just saw a beautiful photograph of a beautiful young woman by the name of Winnie MacDonald. She was First Lieutenant in Korea and served 51 through 55, and I'm joined today by this sweet lady, Winnie. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Not unless you ask me.
Ask you, how are you?
Good.
Good. All right. Well, Winnie, I'm so glad you're joining us today. We've been doing resident interviews for several months now, and I'm just thrilled to have you here. You're a veteran of the United States Air Force. So was your husband, and Winnie also served as a Fayetteville attorney for many years, and we'll get into her career as an attorney in just a little bit. But Winnie, I have to ask, where were you born?
Waback, Nebraska.
So you're a Cornhusker at heart, right?
I don't know that I have a lot of loyalty.
You don't? Well, I had to look up where Waback was, and it's about 2.5 hours west of Omaha.
Well, yeah, it's in Adams County. It's close to Grand Island.
Grand Island. Many people have heard of Grand Island, Nebraska.
Yeah.
So, Winnie, tell me just a little bit about your parents, your siblings, and your younger years growing up in Nebraska.
I was the oldest of 5. Very early in life, I realized that education was the way out of poverty. And I felt we were very poor. My sister now says we weren't poor. Everybody was like we were. But see, this is during the Depression that I'm growing up.
Well, so your parents were, tell me what their occupation was.
Well, my dad was a barber. My mother had taught school before she got married.
Okay. And I understand at around 17, you received a dispensation for nurses training. Is that correct?
Yeah, I started nurses training at 17, which looking back at 17-year-olds now, it's very young. I did not feel young. But the bad thing about starting at 17 is I graduated at 20. I had passed the state boards. I could not be an RN till I was 21.
So what happened once you turned 21? Is that when you decided to enlist?
Yes, I had just finished college midterm and had no idea what I wanted to do. And a friend of mine had joined the Air Force, and I thought, well, that sounds good. So I went down to the recruiting person who recruited me immediately. I was, like I said, a nurse. And then I went out, in Hastings, Nebraska, there was a naval depot. So I went out to the local naval depot and did my physical, sent my papers in, and within a month, I was called up. The other one, Clara, my friend that was going in, she was still waiting to be called up.
Well, that's interesting.
But when I went in, they skipped basic training because they needed nurses so badly. I'm sure that's the truth today. They still nurses. So I got sent to Cheyenne, Wyoming, which is Francis E. Warren Air Force Base. And it was an air base without airplanes, which was a big disappointment.
Well, I would think so.
It was a training command air base.
Okay.
And I love Cheyenne.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been back to Cheyenne since I left. They did one time in Cheyenne, they had a polio epidemic. They sent me to work at Cheyenne General Hospital. And also, they have the big rodeos there. they did send me down to work the rodeos one time. And those guys are fearless that ride those horses and cows.
My husband was a bull rider, so I know. It's
Well, I
pretty
did have
scary.
some injuries while I was nursing at the rodeo. That was an experience.
I'm sure. I'm
Yeah.
sure. Even the rodeo clowns take a big chance
Yeah.
out in that arena as well. So after you finished here, and you were getting ready to go to Korea. Tell us about that time.
Well, what happened is at Cheyenne, it was boring. Well, it was just nursing. I was on a ward where they put the young men that were getting put out of the service, Section 8s, they called them. Then I signed up to go to flight nurses school, which is in Montgomery, Alabama. And I finished flight nurses school. And then when I got back to Cheyenne, I had signed up for overseas. Well, the first assignment that came up was Alaska. I didn't want that. My girlfriend took it. And they told me that I had to take the next assignment regardless what it was. It turned out to be Korea. So I lucked out. And I got to Japan, and they found out I had a MOS for to be a flight nurse. And at the time, they were short of flight nurses. So they sent me to Tachikawa, Japan. And from Tachikawa, we did 30 days TDYs in Korea. The first time I did my TDY in Korea, 30 days in Korea, we didn't have a bathroom. We just had a latrine. Before I got sent over for my second 30 days, the Corps of Engineers had gone in and built a bathroom and an indoor toilet. Mm-hmm. That's rather rude. So in Korea, we flew from Seoul to the small bases where they were fighting. And some of the wounded we picked up were very fresh, had just been shot. That happened more than once. Because if you watch MASH and they come in with the helicopters with the patients on the litters on the side, that was true.
Really?
They'd bring them in, we're there, and then they'd unload them and put them in our plane. Like I said, Riki, they were very fresh wounds.
Well, I'm sure that was
and
vivid memories.
So
of
I
those
think
places.
I got into all the small bases in Korea. And it was an interesting life. That occasionally we'd have air raid warnings. Bed Check Charlie would come over. I don't think Bed Check Charlie could do any damage, except they always made us go to the shelters. And like I said, it was an interesting life. Oh, they didn't make any ways for us to get fed. We could eat in our quarters, but there wasn't a place for us to eat. There were K rations, mm-hmm. which were edible. And I do know that one night I came back late, and my sergeant, who was my orderly on the plane, says, well, come on over and eat with me. So I went over to the sergeant's club and ate and got asked to leave.
Why?
Well, the next morning they came over and apologized, told me I could eat there anytime I wanted to. But I was an officer. I wasn't supposed to be eating in the sergeant's mess.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, that's the only place I ever got put out of.
Well, at least they apologized for it later.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking earlier about your time in Korea, and then when the war was over, there were still things going on in Vietnam and different things like that. So bring us up to date a little bit of what you were doing after Korea.
Well, after the war ended, Indochina was then, which is now Vietnam. It was Indochina. It was a protectorate of France, and France was fighting in Indochina. And in Dien Bien Phu, the French got annihilated. They had numerous injuries. And I'm not exactly sure how. It must have been because the U.S. was involved in UN, because they sent a C-130, which is a huge cargo plane that can be converted for aerovac. They sent a C-130 with 4 doctors and 12 nurses down to Saigon to pick up the French wounded. And I got to go on that flight, which was interesting. We flew down to Saigon, loaded up this C-130, flew it back to Tokyo, and they got sent to Tokyo General Hospital. I don't know, eventually they got aerovac back to France. That was quite an experience.
So your time was taking care of these French soldiers
Yeah.
that had been wounded.
I take it they probably, I have no idea how we were communicating. We must have had translators aboard.
Must have, I don't know, but
Yeah, I don't know French.
I've seen those planes on television, but I can't imagine how massively large they appear in person.
Well, trying to get that many people loaded on and get them in the right place. You know, there was quite an art to loading patients and getting the very sick ones that's going to need treatment at eye level, because the ones that weren't going to need treatment, we could put down next to the floor.
Were you mainly in charge when you were assisting patients, either in the hospital or on this plane or whatever? Were you basically tending to their every need in bed? Did you attend surgery? All of the above? I mean...
Well, you see, once we brought them back to Seoul from the outlying bases, Hospital 101 was there, and they went to the hospital. By the time we got them to take them back to Japan, they were had been treated.
I see. Okay.
Some of them, the chest wounds could sometimes be quite tricky.
I'm sure.
And head wounds could be dangerous.
Especially when you're flying.
Huh?
And especially when they were flying on the plane and had to get
well, you realize
land.
None of our planes were pressurized. They were all basic. They just had the outer shell. It's kind of hard to explain. They were hot, they were cold. We didn't have air conditioning or anything. And you know, you innovate, is what they tell you.
I guess you had to innovate, especially with that many people aboard.
Yeah. It was very basic.
So when you, with your stint during this time, tending the French soldiers, following that, you were sharing with me earlier about you went to another location where there was a polio epidemic.
Yeah. Well, I think I told you earlier that we had taken a lot of Chinese prisoners. So when the war was over, the Chinese prisoners had a choice of being returned to China or going to Taiwan. Well, a whole plane load, I think it was a C-54, a whole plane load did not want to go back to China. I think they were afraid if they went back to China, they would be retaliated against. So one flight I made was a group of, and that was quite interesting. My pilots, it was a plane from Bangkok The pilots spoke Bangkok. The patients were Chinese. My corpsman and myself were American. And you talk about not knowing French. I did not know those languages either.
Wow. I'm sure it was difficult communicating. So once you got those patients delivered to Taiwan, I'm sure you have wondered for many years whatever happened to them, because there's always been the Chinese big brother over Taiwan, and you wonder if they wound up having a happy life or not.
Well, when we got to Taiwan, the mayor gave us a banquet. They were glad to get those people. Then I told you, they didn't know what to do with us as the ARVAC people because there were no wounded. I think they'd been mainly flown over to 101 in Japan. They sent me to the Philippines because by that time we had advisory people in Vietnam. I think I should know more about how we got involved in Vietnam. I do know that we had these advisory people, and they sent some of us down to the Philippines so that if we had to go into Vietnam to pick up some of these advisory people, that I had 3 flights into Vietnam, one to Saigon, and I remember we went to the French hotel there, and I had the best French onion soup I've ever had in my life. I still would like to go back there and have their French onion soup. And the Philippines did not like the fact that we weren't flying much, so they put me on the wards, and we had a polio epidemic then. I had been in a polio epidemic in Cheyenne and then the one in the Philippines. So I don't worry about picking up COVID-19. I think I know my precautions, having worked 2 epidemics.
Well, and speaking of COVID, I want to tell you I'm really sorry that you lost a sister-in-law to COVID. And it was, I'm sure that was very difficult.
Well, I think she got put in a nursing home, which I don't think I would go to a nursing home. I'm very safe here at Butterfield.
I feel very safe working at Butterfield. I think we have a good thing going here, and hopefully all of this will be over soon at some point, but our diligence with our mask and social distancing has actually proven to work here at the village.
Oh, I think our CEO is to be commended for how clean he has kept it, because Arkansas, which is just down the road, has had some problems.
They have, and so have a lot of other communities in Northwest Arkansas.
Yeah.
So when you finished up in the Philippines, where did you go then? Is that when you decided to go back to school?
No, they sent me back to Tokyo, and then Tokyo sent me back to the States. I got assigned to Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, which is where I met my husband. One of the best things I ever did was marry him. Had 5 children who have all turned out good. And then I put my husband through his PhD. We did that up at the University of Kansas. And from Kansas, we went to Georgia Southern, which is in Georgia. And the University of Arkansas came after my husband because Bill Waite and Ken Cook were here. They both had their PhDs from Kansas. And they wanted Mac to come, Mac's my husband, to come to be part of their group. And so, and they all had some grants. And I think Arkansas wanted the grants more than anything. But they did luck out with him because he got Best Teacher of the Year one year.
And he was a professor of geology, correct?
Yeah, he was in geology.
Geology.
And
which I believe...
remote sensing.
Remote sensing, okay.
Yeah.
And you told me he worked with Ken Steele, obviously.
Yeah, Ken Steele, who's
Ken
out
Steele.
here.
Yeah.
Ken was also in geology. And Bill Waite was in engineering. and Vern Cope was in engineering. I think Mac balanced out the trio, being a geologist, and they were in engineering. I'm glad we got sent to Arkansas. I'm glad we decided to come to Butterfield.
Well, while Mac was going to school, and then he took a position at the University of Arkansas,
Yeah.
you were raising the family and the children, and she was very quick to brag they all have their masters, except one, but he's doing very well, correct?
Yeah, they have all done very well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. But then tell us, after, what did you decide to do with your career at that point?
Well, you know, people that go in nursing and find this out, they never have enough help. And it's frustrating. They'll put you in charge of the ward, give you 2 people and 30-some patients. And I just got fed up with it one day and quit. My husband then says, "What are you going to do now?" I says, "I'm going to do volunteer work." He says, "You're too smart for that." He says, "Do something. Do you want to go to medical school?" No, absolutely not. I said, "I always said I'd like to go to law." And luckily, the next day, I'm playing bridge with Diane Eckert. Her husband was dean of the law school. And I said to Diane, I says, "What would you think about my going into law school?" Would you believe the next day I have on my porch all the application forms for law school? And so I filled them out. It was a little late to take the LSAT, but they made an exception. I took the LSAT, which had nothing to do with anything ever happened in my life. The week before the LSAT, I'm down in Dallas taking care of my granddaughter who had just had surgery so her mother could go to work. The night before I took the LSAT, my son took me to the airport. I flew in here, got in at 10 o'clock, got up the next morning, took the LSAT. Walked away from that, said, no way did I pass that thing. God, 2 weeks later, I get my acceptance to law school. What a surprise.
Congratulations.
Well, my husband wasn't. He said, well, maybe they need a number of middle-aged women. That wasn't very nice.
No, that wasn't very nice.
But I got to law school. There were 2 other women my age group and 2 men. At the end of law school, there was only Harry and myself left. People dropped out. And so Harry Hauser and I were both too old to go apply for jobs, we think. So we decided to set up our own law practice. And we did okay, but Harry was getting some kind of retirement from the service, was going to lose it if he kept his law practice. So he decided to drop out of law. Well, luckily, about that time, okay, the lawyer that was with Ray Reynolds got elected county prosecutor. And so Ray wanted somebody to come with him. That was one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Interesting.
Now, Riki, I have to go back, but before I went to law school, I got a master's in public administration. And I had gone over to see if I had any GI Bill, and I did. Had no idea what I wanted to do, and thought, well, I like political science. So I went over, and political science that day was registering people. I lucked out. Conrad Woligorsky was in charge. I met Conrad. I think he looked at this middle-aged woman, didn't know what to do with her. He recommended I take Diane Kincaid's course. Now, Diane was best teacher. She deserved that. She was one of the best teachers I ever had. Diane was exceptional.
And I've heard many people
So
speak
she got
of
to
her
be
and
a friend. People
yes.
do. And she convinced me to go into this Master's for Public Administration. And in that, they assigned me to, you had to do an internship. The CIO, one of these government things I got assigned to, Charlie Williams was in charge. He later became county judge. Charlie was a great person, but I had to write a paper for this. That's where I lucked out again. I went to Conrad and asked him if he would be my sponsor. Conrad said, well, he'd never done one, but he'd do me. That was a pure luck. Conrad was perfect. He not only corrected my paper, he gave me ideas. I ended up with a paper I was proud of, thanks to Conrad. You know Conrad.
I do know Conrad, and he's very well
Like
respected.
I said, I really lucked
campus.
out. Conrad, until when I got out here and I saw Conrad, I was so happy. So happy now. I'm not happy because he doesn't, I understand, he was in healthcare. He is, and of course, even if he were well, we haven't resumed our Wednesday night programs. I do not like the professor that's doing the programs.
Well, there's a new series coming up.
Huh?
Where they're starting a new lecture.
That's what you
next
told
week,
me.
So
yeah, that Conrad, get well.
Conrad, get well. We do miss him being out and about. Anne's keeping him connected to everybody, but so many people have spoken highly of Conrad with their relationships that they've had with you at the University of Arkansas, and evidently, Conrad, you have one of your biggest fans is sitting right here, so that's
He
wonderful.
sure does. I can't thank Conrad enough for what he has done in my life.
Well, I'm so glad that he decided to help you with that paper when he really didn't have to. So that was pretty awesome. So as you decided to run your own practice yourself, tell us what type of law were you into, and tell us some of the situations you encountered through clients.
Well, I really got involved with the battered women things. Having been raised in Nebraska, I was not aware of how many women were battered. That was quite an experience. And also, I did not know that people beat their children. I had gotten spanked with a whip. I will admit, I deserved what I got when I got it. But looking back, I did not know that men beat their wives or that people beat their children. And
I'm sure that was a big shock and very big disappointment to you as well.
I did so many battered women. With my husband being a professor, I could do them if they could just come up with the filing fees. And Riki, you have no idea. These women get battered. These men sweet talk them. I wouldn't have it's always the woman's fault that she got hit. But he would sweet talk them into going back. You would not believe the number of women that we got to the last stage that went back with their husband.
That's really sad.
These men did not like me.
I'm sure, but I'm hoping you had a couple of successful cases where they were able to get out of those situations and start a new life.
Well, I remember one woman, we had gotten her all the way, got her, and we got a lot of good people donated a lot of nice outfits. So we had her dressed up. Would you believe we got to court, and one of his best friends was there waiting to be arraigned. And so we had gotten her, we did get her divorced. I got back to my office, and by then, ex-husband called me because his friend had gone home and said saw us in court. So she was divorced.
So that's did he threaten you in any format?
Hmm?
Did he threaten you for
Not
getting the
him.
divorce?
The only time I got threatened was in municipal court, and it was my client had rented something from this guy, and he was trying to put her out, and we were prevailing, and he got mad, and I did not see it. See, my back is to him, and all of a sudden the bailiff's out of his chair, and the judge is up, and they got the guy before he got me.
Oh, wow.
That was the closest that that one of them that got really mad.
So a lot of the people on the other side of the desk that you were in court against had anger issues, obviously.
Yeah.
And, well, Winnie, I can tell you, you obviously have a caring, loving heart to try to help, civil cases and women and children, excuse me, to get out of these situations. Yeah. And it's difficult, I'm sure. I mean, I'm like you. I grew up in a loving home. My parents loved each other. I never saw my father ever even speak to my mother angrily. And so I'm sure, just like you, it was hard to accept that people do act like that.
Well, when I had another guy threatened me one time, his lawyer calmed him down. Mm-hmm. And like that time was the time that somebody really came after me.
Well, that would have been really
scary.
Like
I said, I didn't know anything was going on until the bailiff jumped up, and in court we always have a bailiff plus a judge. And
Who was was it Chancery Court? Were you in Chancery Court?
No, this was in municipal court.
Municipal
then,
court.
After we won in municipal court, he took us to civil court, we had a second trial on that. We prevailed both times.
Who was your favorite judge?
Oh, Lineberger.
Lineberger.
I liked Judge Butt. I admired him very much. But he was a regular Southern gentleman. You could not get on the elevator or anything ahead of Judge Butt. He always stood back for you.
Well, that truly is a Southern gentleman.
And I liked him too. The judges all treated me fairly.
So how long did you practice law in Fayetteville?
About 20 years.
Do you have any idea how many cases you had? How many cases you had?
I had hundreds. Now that I'm going through them, thinning them out.
Wow.
More than I thought I did. I did okay.
I think it's interesting talking about Winnie's career in the military, her time in the military. She was a little taken back when none of her 5 children actually wanted her Air Force uniform. But then she piped up and she was so proud that one of her grandsons spoke up and wanted your uniform. So I think that was really speaks highly of your grandson. What is he doing now?
Well, one of them works for a hospital. It does it all online. I don't understand, Riki, sometimes what they all do. One works for AT&T. I got 2 that graduated from Notre Dame, 1 that graduated from Southern Cal, 1 that graduated from Missouri. Oh, Sarah is RN. She is head of a hospital wherever she works, somewhere back in Indiana. And let's see, I've got 12 grandchildren. One I told you is a senior this year. That's who knows what's going to happen by graduation. And actually, one of them is going to SMU. One is going to Duke. That one I'm very proud of. She's got a full ride to Duke.
Impressive.
And she's going to come out with a PhD. Let's see, some of them are much younger.
Well, obviously, Winnie, you've instilled a sense of responsibility in your children and grandchildren, so I know you're very, very proud of all of them. And I'd love to meet some of them sometime. I'm
Oh,
sure
yeah.
be interesting
You know,
to visit with.
I'm a proud grandmother. They're exceptional.
I'm sure. And Winnie, when we were in your apartment the other day, I wanted to compliment you when I saw the beautiful porcelain and ceramic figurines that you have. You obviously have collected these figurines over the years. Tell us just a little bit about the ones you have on display.
Well, it was kind of an accident that I got into collecting the Oriental figurines, that I went into a pawn shop one time and the guy was so happy. Somebody just sold him some, and I bought one. And then that started it. Like it was, and when I moved out here, they gave me Cecily as an interior decorator. I don't know if you remember Cecily.
I do.
She came down and she looked at them and she suggested that I have the things built around my exit to the balcony.
Built-in bookshelves or
Yeah.
shelving of sort.
And so when we moved out here, Cecily was a tremendous help getting everything organized. And I don't think Cecily's still here.
I don't know if she's helping new residents decorate or not, but I believe that you loaned a few of the figurines to me for the glass display cases we have here in the village, and I would like to ask if we could maybe display them again. It's been several years since we showed some of the figurines, so maybe in a few months, a few months from now, we could display those again if you're okay with that.
You know, I pick them up at thrift stores, or sometimes I order them from places online.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, I've got hundreds, I know. But I've got hundreds of books too.
Books? What kind of books?
Hundreds, yeah. I didn't show you my bedroom books. And like I said, I got about 80 ginger jars.
Oh, those are beautiful. And there are a couple of them in the living room. I really hope you'll agree that we can do a display in the near future of these beautiful pieces, because I know you're really proud of them.
I'm proud to share them.
Well, so Winnie, if I could ask you, in your lifetime, what is one or two things that you feel have really influenced your life? You're a very sweet, kind person. You're very dedicated to whatever it is you're doing. Your military career, your law career. Is there anything particular that has inspired you?
Well, you know, I read a lot, and I realized very early that education was the way, like I said earlier, education was the way out of poverty. And I still firmly believe that education is a big step.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked hard to get my basic degree. My last two summers, I was in nursing training. I convinced the people in the office to let me work evenings because I worked the last 2 summers in nurses training. I went to college. The college was right there in Hastings. And by the time I got through nurses training with the hours they had, I only needed another 3 semesters. So I went a full year. The first semester I went, after I got out of nurses training, I borrowed money from my brother. But by the time I got through that year, I had worked enough at the hospital that I had earned enough to pay him back. And so then the next year, semester, I was on my own. I want everybody to understand, back when I went to college, it didn't cost very much. I think when I went to nurses training, it cost my dad less than $300 for the 3 years. And I'm sure the kids in nurses training nowadays cannot believe that.
I'm sure they can't. I mean, now it's tens of thousands of dollars just to go to a regular, LPN program, let alone a registered nurse program.
Well, back when I was in nurses training, you lived in nurses' quarters. They furnished your uniforms. They furnished your meals. And like I said, you got 2 years college credit by the time we took pharmacy, we took chemistry, we took biology. We took a lot of college courses. We went to college full-time the first semester. That was a disappointment. I wanted to nurse. I went to college.
I know, you had to go through all those steps, though, to get to nursing.
Yeah. Well, it was...
Well, I know there were several young men and probably some women who were in the military that are glad you went to nurses training and did all you did, because you had a part in saving many lives, I have no doubt.
Yeah.
Well, Winnie, I just cannot tell you how much I appreciate you visiting with me today. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your service to our country. You didn't have to, and you did, and I thank you so much. And I'm so happy that you're a part of Butterfield Trail Village and Fayetteville, our greater community, and I appreciate you so much.
I've been very lucky, Riki, very, very lucky. And like I said, I came from a good, solid background.
A good Cornhusker, Nebraska background turned Razorback, true?
Yeah, I'm a Razorback.
All right.
That's how I know Gay Harp, because we go to the games. I know a lot of people that sit on a bus. We go to the games, and I have no idea what's going to happen this year.
Well, that goes for me too, Winnie. We have no idea, but we're just going to have to take it one day at a time, 1 month at a time. We know our Razorbacks are going to be doing a few things, so we can be supportive through the television and things like that about the Razorbacks and the university. But thank you again so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in, and look forward to seeing you for our next interview.
Well, thank you.
Have a great day.